Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're breaking down Chargers rookie running back Omarion Hampton. He was one of two first-round rookie running backs selected in the 25 NFL draft, and he was selected 22nd overall. What do we think his fit looks like with the Chargers? Does he fit the scheme? What does the depth chart look like? What moves have they made? And what might we be able to expect from him in fantasy? Watch to the end of this video, and you should have a pretty good idea. So like I mentioned, he was selected 22nd overall by the Chargers. We had been seeing a trend with running backs really not being selected very highly in drafts. Sure, we had Bijan and Gibbs, but we didn't have any selected in the first round in 2024. Only one selected in the second round, right? A couple in the third. In 2022, we didn't have any in the first round either. We had a couple in the second, two, I believe, specifically. In 2021, we did have two. But in general, the last couple seasons, we just hadn't seen running backs being valued that highly, especially after their rookie contracts are up. And I really think we're about to see a resurgence of value with running backs, especially after Saquon Barkley led the Eagles to the Super Bowl this past season. I think, it's a copycat league, right? Teams are going to say, oh, wow, okay, well, maybe running backs are valuable again, which is going to be great for us in fantasy because we really like to see the significant team investment with our running backs. And so I wanted to take a look at hit rates from first-round running backs from 2020 through 2025, a good 5-year sample size here for us. In 2020, we had CEH selected by the Chiefs 32nd overall. Now, I really wasn't very high on him. I thought he was probably, worthy of a 4th-round pick. He just didn't have any of the athleticism that we want from our running backs. He was a decent receiving back, but, not the best. But, Mahomes wanted him and pressed for him, so they picked him 32nd overall. Well, in 5 seasons, he has not been an RB1 once, but he has been an RB2 once. And so that's a 0% RB win hit rate and a 20% RB2 hit rate. Then in 2021, we had Najee Harris and Travis Etienne selected 24th and 25th, respectively. In 4 seasons, Najee has been an RB1 once and an RB2 3 times, a 25% RB win hit rate and a 75% RB2 hit rate. That's pretty solid, much better than CEH. Then we have Travis Etienne selected 25th overall once again. In 4 seasons, he's had 1 RB1 season and 1 RB2 seasons. And so that's a 25% RB1 hit rate and a 25% RB2 hit rate. Now, neither of these two are the best, but you would definitely take that in general. It's incredibly unlikely that you get a career RB1, even with first-round running backs. It's just not that common that, you have these running backs for 5 to 6 years hitting consecutively, right? Then in 2022, we didn't have one. Then in 2023, we had 2 wonderful running back prospects in Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. And so Bijan Robinson, selected 8th overall in 2 seasons, has been an RB1 twice, has not been an RB2, but that's a 100% RB1 hit rate and a 0% RB2 hit rate, rather. That is perfect for us. And Jahmyr Gibbs, selected 12th overall, has been an RB1 twice and has not finished as an RB2. So just like with Bijan, you have a 100% RB1 hit rate and a 0% RB2 hit rate. Perfect as well. Now, I want to mention, there is a vast difference between Bijan and Gibbs, who were selected 8th and 12th, respectively, versus the likes of CEH, Najee Harris, and Travis Etienne, who were selected, towards the back half of the first round, right? Well, that's when we get Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton here. So Jeanty's, more along the likes of the Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of draft capital, whereas Hampton received 22nd overall draft capital. I do want to say, though, that I think as a prospect that I liked Hampton much better than CH for sure, quite a bit better than Najee Harris. Now, I was relatively high on Travis Etienne for sure. He's dealt with some injuries. It's kind of sapped him, in my opinion. But, taking a look at the data here, among these players, 80% had at least 1 RB1 season, CH being the exception, right? 100% had at least 1 RB1/RB2 season, so that's great. 35% of all seasons among these players, they had an RB1 production season, and 65% of all seasons, they had at least an RB2 season. That's a pretty good hit rate, to be honest with you. But then, when you take out CH, who was just a total bum, dealt with some mental issues for sure. But if you take him out of the sample size and just look at 2021 through 2025, we have 50% of all seasons for these running backs, they were an RB1, and 83% of all seasons were at least an RB2. That is a fantastic hit rate. And I really think that first-round running backs are some of the best buys in fantasy football, especially in your rookie drafts. And so I wanted to take a look at some team stats for the Chargers from this past season, under Jim Harbaugh. So the same, Greg Roman scheme that we're going to get this season. And so their run block rating per PFF was 21st overall this past season. That really isn't very good. We're going to go into some moves in a minute that they made that I think are going to help out the Chargers this season. But taking a look at the rush yards per game, they're 110.7. We're good for 17th in the NFL. That isn't particularly good. That is rather average. But when you take a look at their attempts, their rush attempts were tied for 11th most in the NFL. So it wasn't really for a lack of trying. In my opinion, it was a lack of talent. J.K. Dobbins did start out the year pretty hot, but then, he got hurt. And then they were left with Kamani Vidal and Gus Edwards, neither of which I was particularly high on. But once again, in this Greg Roman offense, they want to run as much as humanly possible. They like to deploy heavy personnel packages to get the job done. I think they're going to have a lot more success this season for sure. Their team rush rate of 45.5% was good for 10th in the NFL as well. So a very high rush rate comparatively, right, for the rest of the NFL. Their team rushing touchdowns of 17 were good for 11th. I think we're going to see a substantial increase there this season. But you take a look at their rush success rate, right? Their 37.6% was only 29th. I think there's a variety of factors here. I think that their offensive line just wasn't that great. Their tackle play was pretty good, to be honest with you, in terms of Joe Alt and Slater, right? But the interior just wasn't very good. But more importantly, especially when J.K. Dobbins was hurt or just out altogether, their running backs were just not very good. And so taking a look at some of the Chargers free agency signings among the offensive line, first of all, they signed guard Mekhi Becton. He was fresh off a Super Bowl victory with the Eagles. His run block rating of 70.3 was good for 31st among guards. So honestly, that's, middle of the road. There's 2 starting guards per team, right? Now, Andre James was also a depth piece. His was 58th best with the 50.2 grade there. He's more of a depth signing for their center position, which, depth is always good because you could always do worse than that for depth at the center position. So I really like that they tried to address the free agency by getting both depth and a starting guard to help the interior of their offensive line, because once again, their tackle play was much better than their guard play this past season. And now taking a look at their depth chart, right? So obviously at quarterback, we have Justin Herbert. He is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. That is fantastic. You want to be able to have somebody that can take the pressure off of your run game with the passing game, right? Now, to be fair to him, it was not the other way around this past season. They really didn't help him, much outside of the beginning of the year with J.K. Dobbins, who was pretty effective, to be fair to him, earlier on. But at running back, they signed in Najee Harris in free agency. Now, they did give him a substantial contract for a free agent running back, but it's only a 1-year deal. And when I say substantial, we're not talking, Saquon Barkley type of contract in terms of an annual basis, but, definitely more than somebody like Rico Dowdle, for instance, right? Or Javonte Williams, right, with Dallas. So he definitely did get starter money, but then they drafted Omarion Hampton 22nd overall. After the Najee Harris signing, I was a little bit confused because I thought to myself, well, within the first 3 to 4 rounds, you can get a running back, in my opinion, at least, that's better than Najee Harris. And so, I was a little bit worried because it was a prime landing spot for a running back. They really, that was one of the final things they need besides some, potentially some more assistance in the interior of the offensive line, right? Or potentially depth at tackle as well, at least among the line. But Omarion Hampton being selected in the first round, I really don't think Najee Harris is going to be doing too much to take away from him. I think, maybe at the beginning of the season, they might be splitting some reps. But I think especially towards the tail end of his rookie season, rather, for Omarion Hampton, I really think he's going to take over. And especially next season, Najee Harris is just on the 1-year deal. I mean, then you have, Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal. That's not really scaring anybody. Now, at wide receiver 1, they have Ladd McConkey, who is a very good slot in Z. I definitely think that he's going to be one of the most effective players in this offense. He's a great route runner, a good separator, good hands, pretty good after the catch as well. Then they have Quentin Johnston. Yeah, moving on. They drafted Trey Harris to be a vertical presence on the boundary. I do like that for the rest of the offense. I think it's going to open things up. I'm not particularly high on him per se, but, from a fantasy perspective with him, he did land in a pretty good spot. Really, boundary wide receivers aren't what we're looking for in fantasy to score us points. If you think about the top options for us in fantasy, they do play a boundary at times, but they're really more versatile than boundary. Then they have Mike Williams to be an X as well. Maybe Trey Harris can learn something from Mike Williams to help him out. Tight end, they have Will Dissly, Tyler Conklin. They did draft Oronde Gadsden the second. I really like that draft pick. I think he's a sleeper potentially as well. Then they have Matlock at fullback. He's fine. And, along the offensive line, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are fantastic tackles to have. Mekhi Becton is a significant upgrade. And then you have Bozeman and Johnson. Really, this offense is going to be fantastic in my opinion. And I think they're going to try to be a lot more balanced or potentially even more run heavy than balanced even per se, because they started off the season with, a much lower pass rate over expected than they saw in the second half of the season, especially after the bye. The defense and the lack of an efficient running game really led to that, in my opinion. I think they're going to be a lot more run heavy this season, and I think they have the roster to do it. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a Patreon member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. There we're going to have weekly live streams where we go over, fantasy news, potential buy low candidates, sell high candidates, depending on the news. We're going to give you specific league-oriented roster construction with trade advice based on your specific league settings there. We're going to give you access to early videos. We're going to give you the ability to suggest videos as well. I made a private video for someone on Isaac Rendo, some of the pluses, minuses to his game, things to like, and specific price points to sell or buy for. You're also going to find that we are working on a model with predictive capability for running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers based on a variety of specific metrics, minimums and maximums to be in an acceptable range for us in fantasy that will be predictive and lead us to being able to be more successful, we think, than the average person in determining which prospects based on these thresholds are likely to hit or unlikely to hit. And we're also going to be updating that each and every single year with the new prospects so that we can continuously have the best model possible. So once again, if you'd like to become a member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. Thanks. And so I wanted to take a look at Hampton's fit with the Chargers. So I took a look at an excerpt from Ortiz and Harbaugh. Ortiz said, I think he's going to fit right in with that physical mentality and that speed and explosion as well. It goes on to mention that Harbaugh raved about Hampton's ability to break tackles, and for good reason. According to PFF, 2,505 of Hampton's career rushing yards came after contact, which is just ludicrous and is backed up by the film. He also forced 155 missed tackles during his collegiate career. He's not quite on that Genty level by any means, but he is still very, very good at that as a prospect, and the film once again backs that up as well. Harbaugh said he's able to step through it and step over it. He also noted Hampton's ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and his prowess in pass protection. I think that he's above average as a pass protector, not particularly elite, like somebody like Travion Henderson, for instance, but I definitely think that he's above average once again. And, as a receiving back, I think, for somebody with his frame, he's not given the benefit that somebody like Henderson is to be quite as nimble. But, for his size, I think he's a very good receiver with the lateral agility to have the upside to be one of the better big backs in the receiving game. I also took a look at the types of runs from the Chargers from this past season versus Hampton's in North Carolina. So remember that this is a Greg Roman offense that Jim Harbaugh is employing. And so they did 212 gap runs this past season, which was 55% of their total runs. And they did 174 zone runs, which was good for 45. Well, at North Carolina, Hampton did 104 gap runs, which is good for 38% of his runs, and then 171 zone runs, which is good for 62. So that is a little bit of a flip, but I think he's both good in the gap and zone runs. So I really don't think that it's going to be a poor scheme fit. I think it's actually going to be a great scheme fit for him in this Greg Roman offense. And so I also wanted to take a look at some advanced stats once again. And so I took a look at draft eligible FBS running backs with at least 100 plus rush attempts. That was a 72 sample size here. Hampton received 281 attempts this past season. His yards per attempt in the sample size of 5.9 was tied for 12th. His yak per attempt of 4.35 was 6th. He is particularly good at getting yards after contact. His breakaway run percentage, which is 15 plus yard rushes, of 43.9% of his runs was good for 16th. That's fantastic. His PFF rushing grade of 90.5 was tied for 7th. I definitely agree with that. I don't always agree with PFF's grading, but I definitely think that he's arguably 7th, if not better, in terms of as a pure rusher among this draft class, at least. His PFF receiving grade of 65.4 is 25th. Once again, that's solid in terms of a sample size of 72 here. I think that's reasonably accurate. I think he's fine. I don't think he's special, but I think he's good enough to get it done, which we do like for fantasy, right? Taking a look at his yards per out run, his 1.4 were 7th. He was efficient with the work that he was given. His elusiveness rating of 128.1 was 7th. He is very elusive for somebody his size. I think he's more powerful than elusive, but he's still very elusive as well, and I definitely think he was worthy of that first-round selection. Taking a look at his missed tackles forced, his 73 were 5th in the sample size, which backs up his elusiveness rating, right? And that was 0.26 missed tackles forced per attempt. Fantastic number. His rushing yards and per game of 1,660 and 138.3 are fantastic numbers. His receiving yards and receiving yards per game of 373 and 31.1 per game are great for a back as well, especially, for somebody that has the bell cow build that's one of these bigger backs. In college, you just generally don't see quite as much receiving work unless you're one of these elite backs. So I was actually quite impressed with that. And he had 17 touchdowns in total. And so finally, I wanted to take a look at some of the grades that I gave him, his size, his draft capital, and some of his athleticism before we wrap it up here. So Hampton is 6 foot, 221 pounds. That is a 30.0 BMI. That is the ideal size in the sense of you want to be 30.0 or higher in terms of your BMI to be considered generally applicable to be a bell cow back and be able to hold up in terms of your durability, right? His draft capital, he was a first-round pick. That is elite, just like his BMI. Now, my comp for him was Josh Jacobs, a powerful runner that's good in both gap and zone schemes. He's going to be the kind of grinding back that you give the ball to over and over again to wear down defenses. He's going to score touchdowns. He's good around the goal line. My official grade for him was an 80.5 out of 100, which is a great running back prospect. I don't think he's quite elite. I think Genty I had at an 89. I think he's a lot more close to elite than Hampton is, but I still think he's a very good running back. Now, taking a look at his athleticism, you'll notice that among basically all of the elite running backs for us in fantasy, they are almost all exclusively good athletes, right? Especially even by NFL standards. Everybody at the NFL level is a good athlete, right? So taking a look at his 40-yard dash time, his 4.46 was ranked in the 86th percentile among running backs. Fantastic. But, for somebody that's 6 foot, 221 pounds, that's great. His 111.7 speed score is in the 94th percentile. Fantastic. His burst score of 129.6, it was 91st percentile as well. That's important to be able to get up and go, get through the hole when you need to, be able to burst into the open field, accelerate. Very, very good stuff. He didn't get the agility drills done. I don't think he would have done, particularly well just because he's a bigger back, but I think, he's nimble enough for his size for sure. And then he did 18 bench reps, which is 35th percentile. I don't really have any concerns about his play strength. I don't really care, to be honest with you, about the bench press. But I definitely think that he has some elite traits about him, such as his size, his draft capital, his size-adjusted athleticism. And I think that he's a great running back prospect. And I think in terms of his fit, it's a fantastic fit. Jim Harbaugh wants one of these bell cow backs that he can just ground and pound, salt the game away with to be able to grind out these tough divisional wins. They're going to have to contend with, the Broncos, the Raiders less so, but still they're much improved. So it's a very tough division. I think he's a good fit. His Greg Roman offense is going to ask a lot of him in terms of run. And now, where do we think he's worthy of going in rookie drafts? Well, I definitely think that you should probably consider him at the 102. I still think Ashton Genty is just such a better prospect with even better draft capital that I just think that he is a tier above. But I think anywhere from, in Superflex, the 102 to 104, in 1QB, probably the 102 to 103. I think you should be considering him here. I think he has both the draft capital and the build to be a bell cow. It's a good fit. He may start off a little bit slow because there is Najee Harris there, so that is something to consider, right? But talent wins out, and he has the draft capital where they're going to look to get a good return on their investment, let's say, right? Now, in terms of redraft, it's a little bit tough to know right now, but I think he's probably worthy of a 5th to 6th round pick in redraft. You probably want to have somebody that you can feel pretty confident, 2 other backs that you should feel confident with that you can start until we really know that he's going to be able to get the majority of the touches. But somebody with first round draft capital is going to get touches and is going to be heavily involved. We've seen with players like Bijan Robinson, Arthur Smith just crushed his rookie season, but he was still an RB1. Gibbs, before the bye, really had some production, but after the bye, he exploded, and he also ended up being a an RB1 rather. So I definitely think that Hampton is probably worthy in the 5th to 6th round in terms of redraft. That 102 to 104 range, or 102 to 103 and 1 QB in your dynasty rookie drafts. And I think he is in an absolute smash spot. And I think you are going to be quite happy with what you get from him during his hopefully lengthy NFL career. With that being said, if you like what you've seen and heard, feel free to like and subscribe. I love doing these videos. Feel free to join my Patreon once again. I'm going to leave that link in the description as well as the comment section. I really would appreciate your support. And yeah, have a good day.